Greetings students, my name is Shivam Raj and you're watching me on Study Capital's YouTube channel. Since the exam is just around the corner, I've come up with a series of key terms, post-colonial key terms, a series of key terms that you'll probably not find anywhere else in your traditional books such as M.H. Abrams and Cudden. So I'm going to be discussing those terms. This is part 2 of that same series, and we'll take a look at some other key terms, post-colonial key terms that is. Okay, so the first term on today's agenda is torrid zones. Now, it may seem like a geographical area, uh, uh, and you're not entirely off. You're not entirely wrong. It has to do with geographical location, but not in a nice way. Okay, so the colonial masters, the Brits, the Portuguese, the Dutch, they viewed the people from this torrid zone. People such as from India, from largely from Africa, from India and South America, as people in a certain in a particular light, and they believe that climate has a role to play in how people act and behave. Okay, so people from hot regions where the sun is out a lot and where temperatures can go up to 30s, 40s, because that's not the case in Europe, and so they believe that people behave and act in a particular way because of the weather, and they believe that as the temperature increases, as the hotness increases, so does the promiscuity of people increase, right? So people from torrid zone, people from Africa, people from India, people from South America, uh, they are lusty people, they are promiscuous people. You might have heard the phrase Indians breed like rabbits, right? Okay, so this quote, or this line that Indians breed like rabbits, or like Africans are all lusty, or Chinese are like this, Chinese breed like rabbits. These ideas, how do these ideas take foothold in popular culture and in people's imagination, right? So they do through these ideas that are propagated and projected through movies, through writings, through diary entries, through novels. Okay, and torrid zone is one such idea, that people believe that people from India, people from Africa, okay, people from South America, they're all lusty people, they're all promiscuous people. Okay, they're lazy people at times. Okay, so people, Indians are lazy people, Indians stink. So these ideas were given a reason, that this is the reason, right, that these people are like this, and the reason is because they are from torrid zone. Okay, so torrid zone is an important critical idea in post-colonial terms, and was a rather important tool for the colonial masters. Okay, and for example, let's take the example of E.M. Foster's A Passage to India. So there's this character called Dr. Aziz. He's a Muslim man. He's a doctor. Okay, and then there's this other character called Adela Quested. She's a white British woman. She comes to India. She used to be married to an officer, a white British officer in India, and she's on an expedition. Okay, she wants to watch some caves. She wants to see how the Indian people live, their sites, pilgrimage sites, their sacred sites. And she hears about this, these caves, Malabar caves, and she wants to visit those caves. So with the help of Dr. Aziz and a host of other people, they go into the caves, and when she enters the caves, she sort of faints. Okay, she passes out, and when she wakes up, there's a lot of shouting, and she screams. When she comes out, and Dr. Aziz is nowhere around that woman, but when she comes out, she alleges that Dr. Aziz has raped her, and Aziz is absolutely discombobulated. He has no idea what has happened. He's disoriented. He has no idea why she's claiming that he's raped her. Uh, and then the trial goes on, and it's very central to the novel. Uh, uh, you know, uh, Passage to India, E.M. Foster's A Passage to India. So, and then the idea, the how the picture is painted, how the scene is set, is that the sun is out, it's very hot, the Malabar caves are hot, everything is loud, her voice is echoing. Okay, then the climate, India is a very hot country. Everything is sweaty, everybody's sweating all the time. So people don't wear clothes, right? So people wear vests. Okay, people are wearing shorts. Okay, people wear soft cotton muslin clothes, right? So it's a lot more see through than what people in the Europe wear, wools and then coats and coats. So you can't see this the skin as much, but in India you can see the skin, you can see my skin, even though it's winter. So imagine 45-degree temperature in caves, you can see people are wearing nothing but vests and half shirts. So it is conducive to promiscuity. This is what they argue, the colonial masters. So the torrid zone, the climate, this hot climate which makes people wear short clothes, this plays into the idea of us being promiscuous, and which is at full display in Ian Foster's A Passage to India. Next up is miscegenation. Okay, now we can use the same example here also. This example of Dr. Aziz and Adela works here beautifully. So miscegenation is nothing but the fear of mixing of races. Okay, and there was this pseudo science called eugenics that asserted that there are different kinds of people. Okay, some people need to be preserved, they need to be mated with similar like-minded people with the same abilities. So people, let's say some people who are disabled, maybe somebody is a little short, okay, somebody has some sort of locomotive disadvantage. Okay, you can't marry them, you can't make love to them, you can't reproduce, you can't procreate, and you must not procreate, right? So this is the eugenics agenda, and this is the fear that intermixing of people may result in unfit progeny, unfit children. So this is the fear. Then this fear translates into not just from able-bodied and disabled people into races. So this whole idea of race, which is total nonsense, absolutely total crockery. But this idea that there are various races, black race, white race, we are all part of one race, which is human race, right? Which has been established. Okay, it's a scientific fact, but the idea that there are so many different races that they must be kept at bay. So the white must not mix with black. Okay, the Portuguese must not mix with Americans. Okay, or the Portuguese must not mix with the South Americans. So this is the idea of miscegenation, and if this happens, then God help us, all hell all hell breaks loose. So this anxiety, that this fear that miscegenation is this mixing of races, black and white, Chinese, Americans, all of this, this anxiety is reflected in literary works like Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, where the character of Bertha Mason, a Creole woman from Jamaica, represents the anxiety surrounding miscegenation. So she's portrayed as mad. Okay, she's a mad crazy woman. Okay, and therefore it is easier to paint her as such, right? Because of the fear of miscegenation, that if the progeny is also going to be unfit. So this is miscegenation. Next up, very closely interlinked with miscegenation is mestizo or mestiza. Mestiza. So this hyphen here, this stroke here, mestizo, mestiza. Mestizo means mestizo stands for man, mestiza stands for woman. Okay, it emerged in Spanish and Portuguese colonies to describe the mixed race offsprings of Europeans and indigenous Latin Americans. So English are not the only people who colonized other parts of the world. Portuguese had a presence in India itself, right? In Goa, and in other parts of the world also. Then Dutch were famous for their cruelty, right? More so at times than the British. So there are other colonial powers also. There were other colonial powers also. So mestizo has to do with the fear that Europeans, Portuguese, these people had when they were ruling Latin America. So they were in power. They were the colonial masters. They were the Brits. They were like the Brits, how the Brits are to us, right? So they were there in Latin America, and the same fear of miscegenation was there also, and the offspring that results from miscegenation, right? This fear of mixing of races, the progeny, or the offspring or the child of the union of two different races, especially if it's from European and Latin American, that is called mestizo. If it's a boy child, it's a girl child, it's called mestiza. Okay, and you can see not directly but indirectly in George Orwell's Burmese days, these fears and these ideas playing out. Then Luso-tropicalism. Now Luso, if you know what Luso actually means, what Luso stands for, then Luso-tropicalism becomes a cake of work, a piece of work, right? So Luso actually stands for Portuguese or anything to do with Portugal. So Luso, with Portugal's language, Portugal's food, Portugal's culture, anything to do with Portugal. Okay, that is Luso. So lusotropicalism. Now it's a concept. You should be aware that it's, who has coined this term and who is credited with this particular term. It is this Brazilian sociologist called Gilberto Freire. Okay, so Gilberto Freire is credited with coining this term, and he proposes that Portuguese colonialism was more humane. Okay, it was more kinder to its population, to its colonized people, than the Brits and the Dutch were to their colonized people. So this is basically lusotropicalism, that and they were more adaptable. That Portuguese people were more adaptable to the to the native conditions in which they were going to rule, as compared to the Brits and the Dutch. And the reason that he cited was due to Portugal's own history of being colonized. Okay, so due to Portugal's own history of being colonized, since they were also colonized, they were themselves colonized people, they are going to be more amenable to the experiences of their colonized people. This was the idea of lusotropicalism coined by Gilberto Freire. And Freire argued that Portuguese colonialism was characterized by a lack of strict racial segregation and greater cultural integration with colonized people. So now you know how we just a minute ago we looked at the idea of miscegenation and mestizo people, and how people looked at the idea of mixing of races with suspicion, with anxiety. This sociologist, Brazilian sociologist Gilberto Freire, argues that no, Portuguese people harbored no such sentiments, and they were very free people. They didn't look at mixing of races with such antipathy. And while lusotropicalism portrays Portuguese colonialism is a positive light, it has been criticized for downplaying the actual harsh realities. So this is the idea of lusotropicalism. Very easy to understand. Just remember the name Gilberto Freire, who's a Brazilian sociologist. Now the last key term of the day is terra incognita. Now you might have come across this incognito page in Google Chrome. Now what does this incognito page do? Whatever you search, there's no history, there's no, you can't keep track of it. So it's a no man's land, nobody knows what happened there. Okay, everything, sort of vanishes, right? So, okay, so since everything vanishes, there's no man's land, right? So terra incognita, what used to happen when earlier people, people like people from England, people from, Dutch people from Portugal, they used to go on ships and they used to sail, okay, and they used to find pieces of land masses, huge land masses, and they used to stop their boats, get off the boats with their long rifles and bullets. They used to bombard the other the native people, and basically loot and plunder, right, and acquire their land. And their whole argument rests on this idea that that native country has no sense of property. There were no demarcations, there were no boundaries, right? So they they thought of that land, and they convinced the other people that it's terra incognita, which means this is no man's land, right? Because there were no boundaries, there were no markings that this is my house, this is your house. Okay, so for them, in their culture, this meant, and this was a ploy, obviously this was a ploy, that this land is up for grabs. If the Brits reach there first, it's theirs. If the Dutch reach there first, it's theirs, right? So this is terra incognita. That it means basically no man's land, and it's a Latin term, terra incognita, meaning unknown land. And it was used in early European maps to denote regions that had not yet been explored or mapped by Europeans. So see the gall, okay, the audacity, and the solipsism rather, to believe that whatever you have not discovered doesn't even exist. So if I make a map, right, I make a map of, let's say I'm right now in study capital studio in Varanasi, and I make the map of Uttar Pradesh, and I make the map of Lucknow, and map the Varanasi, and I forget to make the map of Kanpur. Okay, so because I haven't traveled to Kanpur, so does that mean that Kanpur doesn't exist, right? But this is the argument in terra, according to terra incognita. So if the European map makers haven't figured out a land, and the European voyagers haven't got out and found a land yet, according to them, if that land is discovered, that land is up for grabs. because that is unknown land, that doesn't exist. And what this essentially means is that you don't exist. If they come up to your shore tomorrow, some aliens ride up in their huge, spaceships and come to Earth, and they tell you that you don't exist because we haven't found Earth yet. There's no mention of any Earth in our scriptures, in our long telescopes, in our maps, and Earth doesn't exist, right? So what that essentially means, that you don't exist, we don't exist. Essentially what it essentially means, that India didn't exist. Okay, Latin America didn't exist because they were not in their maps. So if a country is not in their maps, in the European people's map, in the colonizers map, that land didn't exist. So that essentially means that the people didn't exist, their religion didn't exist, their gods didn't exist, their experiences didn't exist. So if somebody went out, if a white man went out and raped a black woman or an Indian woman, that doesn't exist because that land doesn't exist, that Indian woman doesn't exist, right? So everything becomes very easy. So this is the whole idea of terra incognita. So it is, again, as you can see, these are all tools and all ploys to help the colonizer come into power. So if they come and loot your home, rape your woman, it doesn't exist because the land doesn't exist, right? So how come you exist if the land doesn't exist? There's no such thing as, India, or there's no such thing as a far off Caribbean island, right? So this is the whole idea of terra incognita, and then that land become, goes up for grabs. Okay, and everything along with it, minerals and oil, everything else that is to be found there, culture, and you become their god, right? This is the whole idea of terra incognita, and all of this, these ideas, the consequences that follow are all the assumptions that lead from this basic premise is this idea of terra incognita. Then this land doesn't exist, which in turn means you don't exist, your civilization doesn't exist, nothing exists. So that is up for grabs. In literature, you can see this example from Robinson Crusoe. And Robinson Crusoe lands on this uninhabited island and is marooned on this island. Okay, rather marooned on this island, and he acts according to his whims and according to his fancies, and he becomes the master of that land. He establishes the rule of the land, because he's the master, he's the sole heir of the land. Okay, so then this is a sort of tangential example of terra incognita. Okay, that how you can set up laws in your own name because you're the sole master, because the previous inhabitants don't even exist for your people back home. So if I'm a white man, I land onto this shore called maybe Australia, and I loot, plunder, rape. Okay, that I destroy their whole civilization, and it happened in America. So the native people who are called the native Indians in America, and it happened in Australia also, the Aborigines. You can read, there's this great poem, I don't remember the name of the poet, but there's a poem about the Aboriginals people, the people, indigenous people of Australia, how they were raped, how their women were raped, how their lands were snatched from them, how their babies were killed in their napkins. Okay, so all of that. Okay, but what news gets back home to Britain, or to to the Dutch back home, or to the Portuguese back home, to nice good people back home, okay, is that this land was vacant and our brave soldiers have acquired that land through terra incognita, right? Because it's a fair fight. Nobody owns that land, nobody lives there, right? So this is the whole idea of terra incognita, right? And these are the basic terms, and the legacy of colonial tropes. So these tropes that we've discussed, they're not ancient history, right? They still exist, these ideas still exist, right? In some measure or the other, we still believe in these ideas, or we are led to believe in some of these ideas, or maybe not directly, then the offshoots of these ideas. So this is why we study these ideas, this is why we study history, this is why we question everything, this is why there are no sacred cows, as I like to say to my students. There are no sacred cows. There's no idea great enough that it can't be questioned. Okay, you can question any idea, you can question any belief, and that is how you reach to these conclusions, and then you start to dig out and discover how these ideas took root. So this is the legacy of colonial tropes, and how these ideas come into picture, and how they still survive and continue to survive, and why it is so important to question these ideas. And I hope these few key terms that I've discussed today are clear to you. And this is the second part of the series. I'm going to be coming shortly with another part 3 of the post-colonial series. In the meantime, all the best for your exams, all the best for your preparations. uh, my name is Shivam Raj. I teach English literature for UGC Net. If you wish to join us, admissions are going to be open very soon. In the meantime, all the best for your preparation. Keep watching us on Study Capital's YouTube channel. Thank you for joining.